Howdy do, Mr. Tom. So we talked in the last video that I made for you about keeping up on workers and supply depots and expansions, and using the amount of money you could glean from doing such things to have a much
Additional
bigger
supply
army.
depots required.
So this is the first of, I believe, 5 games that you sent in which you attempted to do that. I can see that you started with triple racks and then went for a factory, and that's
Units
cool.
are
I'm
under
okay with
attack.
that as an opening. Let's just take a gander over here at this command center, and then think about the number of workers you have, whether it's keeping up, which it's not, and then when you need to get another command center. So at 10 minutes, right? You're on. If this command center was constantly keeping SCVs queued up, you'd have 20 or 39 workers. So you only have 31. So you're pretty far behind what you would have if you did it perfectly. And at 6 minutes it'd be 24. It's only 20, so it's 4 behind what it should be. And at 8 minutes it should be 29, and it's 25, so 4 behind what it should be. So just in general, even though you focused a lot on trying to make enough workers, you still didn't quite make enough workers, and that's okay. Obviously, the first couple of times you try this, it's not going to go perfectly. And one of the biggest reasons it didn't go perfectly was when you were attacking, you stopped making workers, but then when you looked back, you made 1 or 2 workers instead of making a whole bunch. So it's okay to make 2 workers when you're constantly looking at your base, and you know that you're going to look back at your command center in a couple seconds. But as soon as you see he's coming to attack you, or as soon as you intend to attack him, queue up to 5, do the attack, and then come back and cancel any that are too high. Because that's the biggest time when you're going to miss workers, is when you're looking at your army. So you always want to queue all the way up to 5 workers at your command center when you're looking at your army. Second thing worth mentioning is that you got way too much gas and didn't spend it. Now, it's impossible to get too much gas, period, because obviously if you went pure Thor, right, you could easily spend all the gas off of one base. Or if you went mass siege tanks with siege mode and upgrades, you could spend all this gas. But you got more gas than you spent because you went primarily marine, which is not gas heavy at all, and then you got a factory, but you didn't make any siege tanks, and you started this upgrade, and so you have 600 gas, and that's 600 bucks you don't have spent on your army. So as you can see, with your focus on economy, you were able to spend about as much money as your opponent this time. But because of this unspent huge amount of gas, that's reducing the amount of money you get to spend on army. Um, this command center is really late. A 9-minute expo is just ridiculously late. Uh, so what would have been better is basically on one base, max saturation on minerals is 22 workers on minerals, and then 6 more on gas. So that's like 26. And then you usually have a couple of SCVs out and about doing stuff, like 2 or 3. So that's why most people say max saturation on one base, especially for Terran, is 30. Um, but as soon as you have 30, you need this other command center to already be done. You don't want it to be starting when you're already capped out. You want it to be done then. And so at normal pace, if you build workers fast enough, you should have 34 at 6 minutes and 30 at 8 minutes. So that means you want to start this second command center at 6 minutes. And you can start it up here where it's safe, or you can start it down here if you want to be ballsy, and either one would be good. Usually I recommend, especially when you're just now getting used to having this much economy, just be ballsy. Plant it in place. Don't try to worry about floating it or anything, because you're going to lose 1 out of every 15 games due to being too overly aggressive with expansions. But that's fine. I mean, if you do better in 14 games and lose 1 game due to being ballsy and planting this expo down, that's a net win. You should totally do it. So at around 6 minutes, I want you to throw down another command center. Definitely don't get this much gas unless you're planning to go almost exclusively higher tech units. If you're going to emphasize Marines in the early game, you only need one geyser, not 2. Um, so anyway, at 10 minutes, I want to just look at army spending. You should be able to spend 3,500 bucks on army at 10 minutes if you expand, and 4,000 bucks if you cut workers and don't expand. You spent 2,100 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, so 2,750. So that's great. 2,750 is a lot, but it's not nearly 3,500. So you're still behind economically, and that's just because even though right now you have 31 workers, which is good, you got them a little bit late. and you also have 600 bucks unspent. So, uh, just getting to the appropriate amount of workers eventually isn't good enough. You really want to get there as quick as possible. You really want to constantly be producing SCVs. So these attacks, the pure marine attacks, they went okay for a little while. You actually almost won this game purely off of these marine attacks. But as soon as he got siege tanks, you should have been constantly pumping your own siege tanks off of this factory. And if you have to cut marines and marauders to do that, then cut them, because at any given moment in a game, there's important units, right? Before he has siege mode, the most important unit for you is marines. But once he has siege mode, the most important unit for you is tanks. Or Thors, or marauders, but definitely not marines. So it's okay to keep getting marines, but you want to make sure they never get in range of sieged tanks. So you have your own siege tanks out in front of the marines and the marine marauder standing behind them. And if he walks into range of the tanks, your tanks start firing, and then you run in front of them to absorb the damage, and then that's how you use M&M and tank against M&M and tank. So this is bad that you have these siege back here, because he can actually hit your command center without coming in range of those tanks. You want him to have to come into range of the tanks in order to get close enough to your command center to do damage. But at least you survived, right? 2 tanks against 5, and he didn't feel like he could push in and get anything done, so you lived. So that's great. But now you're faced with the dilemma that your income is much bigger than his, and he's on 1 base, but he's got units right outside of your purview. So what you want to do here is the vision slow push. First of all, in TVT, it's really important that you always push hold position on your infantry after you move them, because otherwise, when they get hit, their automatic response will be to run in and get hit again. So then you have to spend all your time looking at your stupid infantry and pulling them back. One measure of how much practice you've put in is how well you're able to keep up on workers even when you're in dire straits, right? If you get somebody throwing stuff right outside your base and it scares you, and you completely stop making units, workers and army, then that's bad. That's bad. That's bad. So as we can see, the command center is pretty idle, and then you queue up just 1 SCV at each. And then it's gonna go idle again, and then you queue up 2 at 1, and then it's idle again, and so your macro is slipping when you're feeling threatened. Even though they've been outside your base for a long time, and you're not feeling super threatened. Your macro is still slipping just from him being nearby. That was a good job breaking that contain, but if you look at army spending, you've spent an extra $1,000 over him, so you really shouldn't have had much trouble breaking that contain, and that's just because his economy is so crap compared to yours. So you're basically getting a pure econ win, where like almost no matter what you do, you're gonna come out ahead just because you have so many more bases than him. So economically, at 17 minutes in, you should easily be at 72 workers, or 90, or however many you wanted to get to, and be stopped. So it's bad that you're only at 41, but at least compared to your opponent, you're awesome, right? So good first step, but in the future you want to be a lot better, a lot more workers. And now you're having the problem that in the beginning you had too much gas, and now you have too little gas. But whatever. Anyway, I think that your strongest suit has always been making and using units correctly. And what you really need to work on, at least in the beginning, is just the economy. So I won't talk too much about how you're using these units. It's weird, kind of interesting that you got Cloak when you were only going to make 1 Banshee. Either make a lot of Banshees and get Cloak, or don't get Cloak. This game is dragging on when it really doesn't need to. He basically has no income. He's had a 1 base income this whole time. It can be hard in TVT to actually go deal the killing blow, though. You just kind of get 200 unit space and then say, am I supposed to attack? Because if I attack, I'll run into all these siege tanks and die. What do I do? That's a problem that all Terran have in TVT. So one thing to keep in mind, when you hit 200 unit space, you're not able to build more units. So that frees up a ton of cash. So what you should do with that cash, knock down these rocks, knock down these rocks, knock down these rocks. Take every single command center. Just throw up a command center everywhere. And then start spending money on additional racks and additional factories and additional starports. And just keep your money at around 2,000, and spend the excess over that. on more command centers, more workers, more production infrastructure. And that way, when you guys engage, even if you lose the engagement like this, which I got to tell you was pretty badly done, you'll be able to immediately queue up a majillion trillion dudes. Hey, good job. The BCs clean that up. So, do you realize that with this engagement, basically you just used your tanks and BCs against his anti-air units, and then when all the anti-air was done, then your BCs went out. So I mean, if that's what's going to happen anyway, there's no reason to suicide all of your Marine Marauder. Never walk Marine Marauder into pre-sieged tanks. Like, he was sieged down here. That's not a threat to you. When he sieges up down here, you can just bring your tanks so that they're just out of range of the last tank of his, and then bring in your BCs, and then start killing his front line of tanks. And the only way he can shoot those BCs is with Thors that don't really do damage to BCs, or with Marines, which have such a short range that in order to reach the BC, they're going to get splashed by your tanks. So your goal is just to kill off his Marines. So planting tanks just out of range of this tank, like right here and right here, will kill off all his Marines if you just bring air units in to be threatening. But look how many of your M&M are dying just walking into the tank fire like that. That's really bad. Another alternative, I mean, if you're absolutely insistent on attacking with M&M against pre-sieged tanks, then you want to have the biggest surface area that you can, right? Because, like, imagine if he were here with his tanks, and you could have an arc that stretched all the way across this whole land. That would be much better than having all your guys in a little ball, right? So if he's here and there's a ramp in the way, then you can't get very much surface area onto his tank. So what you want to do is attack from two sides. So get half your army here and half your army here. Or what you can do is just plant like 5 siege tanks here with a couple of BCs floating overhead, and then bring your whole army up here and just walk up this ramp and kill his base. You know, and just be like, I'm okay with your army being outside my base because you can't push through my tanks for the same reason I can't push into your tanks. Right? That's how tanks work in TVT, man. You plant tanks in a spot and no one can go to that spot without losing a crap ton of stuff. So just because he planted tanks near you, you can just plant tanks near his planted tanks and now he can't move them, you know? Anyway. So it hardly matters just because your economy is so much ridiculously larger than his. I would really like for your economy to be even bigger than it is, because 1200, 600 isn't really that big. You really want to go up to 70 or more workers before you stop. 58 isn't really a lot. 58 is actually around how many workers most people have at 12 minutes, and it's 28 minutes into the game. So, you got the message for sure. You're paying a lot more attention to economy now than you were before, but still not nearly enough. So I wanted to look at 15 minutes. We looked on the spreadsheet and said at 15 minutes you should have, like, I think it was 8,000 bucks spent on your army. Let's look how that went. So you have 6,000 plus a little bit of tech, probably 600 plus 200 is like, so you had about 7,000 bucks spent. So that's a lot better than before, but it's still not 8 or 9,000, right? But it's good. It's good. Much better. Big improvement. Good work. Anyway, this game is over. I'm gonna watch the next one. Do 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 do.